I see the evidence of your goodness.
Okay, hello. Thanks for joining us. So, Pastor Ryan, this past Sunday, you preached a sermon looking at John 11. Can you summarize a little bit of what your sermon was about?
For sure. The title of the sermon was Portraits of Belief. And so we walked through the whole chapter of John 11, which is actually one full story about the resurrection of Lazarus from the dead. And so what we did is in the story or in the text, Jesus indicates kind of he has two purposes in this miracle, in this sign, which happens to be Jesus' last miracle in John's gospel. There's been 7 of them. The first one was at a wedding. The last one's at a funeral. And so Jesus has two kind of primary purposes in seeing Lazarus raised from the dead in the way that Jesus did it. And the first is that the Father, God would be glorified and the Son of God would be glorified. And the second is that people would believe. And so this idea of theme of belief comes through the whole story. And so we looked at 5 portraits of belief of the 5 main characters that John actually uses kind of individuals to drive the story forward. So the first character we looked at was Thomas, who represents kind of the disciples. At first, they're nervous to go to where Lazarus is because it puts them in a position where the religious leaders have already tried to stone, arrest, and kill Jesus. And they're like, whoa, this is scary. But Thomas, kind of representing the disciples, says, this is where we're going to go. Let's go die with Jesus anyway. So he's a picture of belief that says, yeah, I have concerns and there's a risk to follow Jesus. But following Jesus is embracing the way of the cross and saying, I'm just going to follow you, Jesus, and trust you even when it feels scary. The second portrait was of Martha, Lazarus' sister, who is this amazing example of discipleship. She's a student. She understands theology, and she's there to receive Jesus and shares with Jesus, hey, if you would have been here, my brother may not have died. And in response to Jesus' amazing self-identification that he's the resurrection and the life, that her brother would rise again, she chooses to believe before she's seen it, before she fully understands, but she believes so much in who Jesus is that she trusts him. A great picture of a belief and a faith in Jesus. Then we looked at Mary, who's this, a lot of, I think, people resonate with. What do we do with our grief? She rushes to Jesus to find him, falls at his feet, and is able to express how she's feeling. She's weeping and crying. And Jesus meets her in that. He himself weeps with her, aware of, he's acquainted with our suffering and grief. And then from that place, Jesus is actually angry. It says that he's deeply moved is actually this picture of him being angry at death and the results of the enemy coming to still kill and destroy. And so he then is moved. But there's this amazing picture of belief that, can I trust Jesus with my heart? Can I trust him with my deepest emotions? And the story paints a picture of a Jesus who is God, who meets us there himself, is not unmoved, which is, we could spend a whole time thinking about our God that isn't distant and far away, stoic. No, he feels with us. Then we looked at the story, portrait of Lazarus himself, who is an amazing example of belief. Why? Because even though he is dead, he still obeys Jesus. We thought about this idea that real belief leads to obedience. Sometimes in our Western world, we can say, I believe in Jesus as an idea, and then kind of do what we want. But real belief means that we follow Jesus in his teachings. Last portrait, we looked at Caiaphas, who represents the Pharisees, because some of them didn't believe. They've just seen and witnessed and heard about a man raised from the dead, and they still are reluctant to believe in Jesus. And they don't believe because they're afraid of losing their power and their position, everything they've worked for. And so we've thought about this idea of sometimes people don't believe because they're afraid of what they might lose, the risk of what it might mean to follow Jesus. And so that was kind of our overall portrait, and then landed with the question that Jesus asks Martha, do you believe in me? And that's the same question he asks us today. Do you believe in who Jesus is? So there's a bit of a summary.
Nice. So we have those portraits that you painted. And there's this idea that maybe the portrait of Lazarus is also kind of a portrait of us. Can you expand a little bit on what you meant by that?
For sure. If you were watching the sermon, I mentioned, because I always have more than I can ever say. That's part of the reason why we do this, because every preacher has more than you can fit in a 30-minute sermon. And so I mentioned that we would talk about this, so here we are. But Lazarus is an amazing picture, I believe, of our own spiritual state. So Lazarus is dead, 4 days in the tomb, which means he is dead. He's decomposing dead. In that kind of time, they would have believed, sometimes they'd believe that the spirit of a person would hang around the tomb for 3 days. And if it was possible, would come back in, but 4 days, they're done. And Martha's concerned that he would stink because he's decomposing. And so spiritually, we are dead. We are dead in our sin. That's what scripture would say. And then what does Lazarus? He responds to Jesus. Jesus has to come and bring him to life. And it's the same with us. Lazarus isn't sick. Lazarus isn't sleeping. He can't simply save himself. He needed Jesus to save him. And I think that's a picture of our own sin, that in our own sin, we are separated from God, but Jesus has come and we respond in faith to him. And when we do respond in belief to Jesus, we actually then experience resurrection life, a new life in Jesus. And so I think he's a bit of a picture of us because he was dead, and spiritually, because of our sin, we are dead. We need Jesus to come and bring life and resurrection because that's what he does.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good portrait of kind of what our faith can be and the challenges to faith that we face as well. In the portraits of the people, most of the people believed in Jesus in those portraits, but not everybody.
Yep.
So why do you think most of the people believed, but not everybody did?
Yeah, we could talk a lot about why as many, again, most of 4 of the 5 portraits, they believe in Jesus. And then some of the Pharisees, Caiaphas, they do not. They're resisting to believe. And there'd be many reasons, spiritual blindness, pride, fear, all the reasons. But I think that there might be a reason why that enhanced the belief or the ability for those who did believe to trust Jesus, even though it was hard, even if it was difficult and risky. And that's because of a deep personal relationship. In this text, it's amazing. Jesus describes people in the story, Martha, Mary, Lazarus, as his friends. It says he loved them. He had a special relationship with his family. And so because of this deep personal relationship, the disciples walking with Jesus, I think it actually fuels our belief because we trust in a person. We trust in Jesus. And he is good, he's faithful, he's kind, and we can trust him with our lives, which actually enhances our belief, our ability to trust and walk with him. Whereas the Pharisees, they actually are kind of resisting a caricature of Jesus. I don't think they actually know Jesus. They think they know Jesus, but they don't really know Jesus. They demonstrate that throughout the whole gospel. And so then it's easier to deny him because they actually they're resisting an idea. And I think this speaks to us a little bit because sometimes, even if you've been to church for a long time, the question is, do you actually believe in Jesus, a person that you can have a relationship with? Or do you just believe in an idea, a concept or character of Jesus and maybe what the benefits he brings to you? So I think there's a bit of an encouragement that the deeper we walk in a personal relationship with Jesus, the easier it is to trust him with our lives when things get difficult or the cost is high. And I think that deep personal relationship is a piece of that. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's so true how the story shows us the importance of having that personal relationship with Jesus rather than, like you said, just seeing him as like this caricature, that was the word that you used there, of what you think he might be versus what he actually is.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you weren't able to get to because again, you're not able to get to everything in a 3-minute sermon. So is there anything else you were unable to get to that you think would be really beneficial for understanding the story?
For sure. There are kind of 2 quick things. One is this. One is that it's kind of this amazing thing that Jesus invites others to join him in the miracle itself. And so we read that Jesus, there's people around him and he tells them in verse 30, he says, take away the stone. So they would have buried Lazarus into like a carved out stone, great tomb with a circular stone that they could roll away. 3 days in, they would have put some spices and that kind of stuff, make sure he's really dead. He was dead. So he invites, when the miracle comes, for other people to help roll away the stone. And then at the end of that section, it says in verse 44, Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. That Jesus is the one who is the resurrection and the life, but he actually invites others to join him, that he invites us as Christians to be his kind of hands and feet. Like Jesus didn't roll the stone, others did. Jesus didn't take the grave clothes off. He had invited others to join to bring freedom to Lazarus. And so I think he uses us. We know that he's the one that does the work, but he invites us to partner with him. Beautiful picture. And the last one, which I think points us to Easter, which is coming soon, is that this is kind of a tale of two empty tombs. Lazarus's empty tomb is a picture and a foreshadowing of Jesus' empty tomb, which is going to come soon. Why? Because Jesus is victorious over death. Death couldn't hold Lazarus in a tomb. Death couldn't hold Jesus in a tomb, which then gives us hope that we can have resurrection life in him, which we're going to think about on Easter Sunday. We're going to look at Romans chapter 6. What does resurrection look like? Look today, not just our future, but today as well. So there's a couple of things that I think are interesting amongst probably more in the text. Yeah.
Perfect. Just what an amazing story to be considering as we start moving closer towards Easter. And like he said, the idea that it's pointing us toward the empty tomb that will be coming on Easter Sunday. Sorry, spoiler alerts. If you didn't know, that's what's coming up.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for spending this time for elaborating more on what you talked about on Sunday. If you missed this Sunday sermon, you can find it on our YouTube channel, and I would encourage you to go and check that out.
Yeah. Even this week, the audio was a bit quiet in the live stream, so we've enhanced it so it's a little bit louder. If you want to hear it louder, you can hear it. But there's also some small group resources, questions that are you can follow a link when you go to our Sunday services on the website. Follow us on Instagram, all those kind of things. And as always, Sharley,
go in grace.
I see the evidence of your